We're back to the Nerdiest Show on the internet. Adil finally found a home in Cairo, and he is with us, happy with a nice shirt and everything.
I was knocking door to door to find the connection.
So our second book is Shooting a Revolution, Visual Media and Warfare in Syria by Donatella Dell'Arata. Blurb on the back says, from ISIS propaganda videos to popular regime-backed TV series and digital activism, the Syrian conflict has been dramatically affected by the production of media. At the same time, it has also generated a huge amount of visual culture. Dell'Arata uses the Syrian case to reflect more broadly on how the networked age reshapes contemporary warfare and impacts on the enactment of violence through images and on images. In stark contrast to the
techno-utopias celebrating digital democracy and participatory cultures, Donatella Dell'Arata's analysis exposes the dark side of online practices, where visual regimes of representation in media production dramatically intertwine with modes of destruction and the performance of violence.
The book was published by Pluto Press in 2018. We have a few things to share about this book, including the table of contents with actually quite a few chapters. Making Media, Making the Nation. Syria's Tanweer in Neoliberal Times. The Whisper Strategy. The Death of Tanweer in Real-Time Drama. The People's Raised Hands. Fear and Loathing on the Internet. The Paradoxes of Arab Networked Activism. Screen Fighters, Filming and Killing in Contemporary Syria. Syria's Image Makers, Daesh, I don't like the spelling, it pisses me off. Daesh militants and non-violent activists. And then finally notes on a theory of violence and the visual in the networked age. The book is nicely praised by Geert Lovink, founding director of the Institute of Network Culture, author of Networks Without Cause, and Dina Matar, head of the Center for Global Media and Communication at SOAS. So this is one of the books that has been sort of circulating in part for many years via the work of Donatella, with whom we cooperated, and she's been published on Jadaliyya and so on. And I think it complements very nicely any sort of literature that you would like to assign, not just on the Syrian uprising, but also beyond. Adil and Nadya, on to you.
Nadya, do you want to start?
I am interested in this book. I think it offers a really interesting way into a lot of topics and themes that have sort of been recycled in certain ways, but offering perhaps a fresh approach to them. In particular, first of all, of course, the Syrian conflict. But also one of the things I think this book looks to offer is basically to sort of foreground the fact that there's a lot of violence in the visual, not just the internet, but also, and not just TV and not just the internet, but just in general. I mean, obviously one of the aspects of the modern era is the visual. And I think there's, following in Foucault, but obviously not only being Foucauldian, there's a lot to be said about the ways in which, not just as the blurb on the book says, the dark side of the digital age, but just in general, the ways in which the visual can be deployed for seriously harmful purposes. And so I'll be interested to know how she actually explores that. And it's worth noting that also, as far as I understand it, this is one of the few books we have that's actually not written by an academic per se, quote unquote, but someone who has been a practitioner in various related fields as well.
I mean, I would agree. I would agree with Nadya on all these points. I would also add that we've sort of seen Donatella's work progress, but this particular book is interesting because it really does disrupt this kind of technological determinism the uprisings in the region, and especially when it comes to Syria. Syria is, in the last 7 or 8 years has become a real sort of lightning torch for the kind of propagandizing on the part of all actors, and the formulation and the mass production of content that elicits like strong emotional and affective response using visual stimulus, and that hasn't been deconstructed in a serious way. So I think that I'm hoping that this book, from the little that I've skimmed through, will deliver on that particular point, because we need to think about how that is employable by various governments, state actors, non-state actors, international kind of players, geostrategic partners who are working on formulating and reformulating and appropriating the images of violence to justify political actions and ramifications. So I think the book is much more about what is happening on a regional level than it is just about Syria. But having said that, the Syrian condition over the last 8 or 9 years is one that requires a very kind of deep dive into the culture of the visual and how that's become so complicated. I mean, whether it's the image of the refugee or the image of the radical kind of jihadist, or the image of the brutal regime. I mean, there's so many different kind of intertwining stories delivered through the visualization of violence. And I think this book may be in a position to answer some of those questions, or at least throw a rock into the stagnant waters. So I'm hoping to also employ that. But I'd love to hear from Hatim about this. I think he has some interesting kind of backstory about the book.
Well, sort of as you said, Donatello had been publishing about Syria for some years before this book, and actually even some time before the uprising began.
And much of that work was about Syrian TV drama production in the Bashar era, and the new sort of terrain of negotiating what it means to be Syria, to be Syrian, negotiations of the national. And 2011 comes along, and suddenly many of these people following those questions have to follow that onto the terrain of social media and digital media. And lo and behold, with this proliferation of actors, you have a much harder time persuasively arguing that there's something liberating about the capacity to speak and post and circulate imagery online, even if that does become even maybe the basic context for action. To be able to act is to create images. And so part of what is important about this book is it takes like a long, hard look into the dark abyss that is the Syrian situation. And this makes it so that this book isn't just important for people who study the Middle East, but people who want to theorize network culture, for people who want to understand war and media technology, people who want to understand the relationship of looking, seeing, liberation, and oppression. Beyond just if you're specifically interested in Syria, in the geopolitical region, if you want to understand war and media in the 21st century, you have to understand something about Syria.
Absolutely. Adil, first of all, there's a remote control behind you on the couch, and I'm afraid it's going to fall.
That's the remote control that switches me on and off, depending on how you...
Okay.
Oh.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'm an automaton.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. Let's move to the third volume.